Good morning. My name is Cheryl Angel. I was born in the Black Hills, in the midst of our sacred places, our homelands in South Dakota. It's part of the Great Sioux Nation. Those lands are also named and claimed and legally belong to the Oceti-Sakowin, the Sioux Nation. It's really hard to celebrate a day when there isn't a reason to celebrate. But it gives us an opportunity to tell the truth. It gives us the space that we need to hold and honor the stories of our Indigenous brothers and sisters. And there are names. There are names that need to be said in ceremony, with love, with reverence, from all of our families. Because none of us would be here without them having been standing in front of us, without them telling us their stories, without them giving everything that they had to us so that we could survive. I want you to close your eyes just for a short time here. And I want you to make a promise. That's my ask, is for you to promise to protect not only the lands that you're living on, not only the water that sustains those lands, but I want you to protect. I want you to promise to protect. Not for me, but for your own grandchildren. Protect and honor the history of the lands that you're living on. Even when they come with hard truths. Because if the mission of the United States government is fulfilled, those stories will disappear. Now I will be gone. So I want to remember the names of all the people who have come before us and given every single thing that they could to make sure that we survived. The songs, the ceremonies, the pain, the lessons. I want to thank you for listening to me, for giving me this opportunity to listen to my brothers and sisters here. And there is something else I want to say. I want to share a message with you It's a list. Today is Native American Day, it's Indian Day. In many states now, there are so many people who realize that Columbus wasn't a man who lived in a manner that we should be celebrating. There are only 365 days in a year, but this day I want to take the opportunity to share something that means a lot to us. And it means that you're going to do more than what you're doing now. Because next year, someone's going to come back to you and ask you what you've been doing this past year. And I'm going to talk about reparations. We had a very short amount of time, and when I say we, I want to talk about all the people who are sitting behind me, about what reparations means to us and what it looks like. So this is a to-do list. It doesn't have 365 things for you to do because the list is incomplete, and we left room for more things to add on. So number 1, rescind the doctrine of discovery. Number 2, rescind genocidal war medals. There's a lot of people in here, maybe the younger people don't even know that there are medals that were awarded to people who killed people like me, my ancestors. But they're out there, they need to be removed. And land back. If no one hasn't heard that word before I'm saying it right now, you haven't been paying attention. You haven't been listening. Because that's in almost every conversation that we have with landowners today. And the reason why this really is important, if you haven't heard it already, these lands, the lands out here, the people who lived on here, they sing songs to that river. They have a name for it. That lake has an indigenous name. And it wants to hear its name again. It wants to hold ceremony with the people who were here holding ceremony for centuries. So for 500 years, these rivers, these lakes, these lands have been neglected. The majority of them have been neglected. And there is no ceremony there. So if you have land and you have an uncle or a grandfather who says, oh, when we got here, we found this over there. We heard that they used to have ceremonies over the hill, right over there. Or they may say, you know, at certain times of the night, at certain times of the year, we hear things. There's something out there. Yes, there is. There's life out there. There's memories out there. There's history out there. Tribal people need to go back to those sacred places and have their ceremonies. They need a base where they can re-anchor themselves and reclaim not only those ceremonies, but that land, and have a relationship with it again, because that's what we do. We have relationships with the land and with the air and with the water. We are totally connected. We haven't been disconnected. Despite how I lived was really simple. When I woke up, I was taken to a place where all the native people, the little kids, we stood, and there was one white person. On the weekends, where did we go? Went to another place like this. There was another white person standing up at the top. So my life has been filled with my brothers and sisters, with one white person standing at the front. And I always questioned, why are we in a place, why are we always continually being taken to places where there's one white person standing in the front? It didn't make any sense to me. So I learned how to be quiet and at least give the respect to listen, because that's what I was told, listen. But the story that these people at the front of the room never made any sense to me. It never really made any sense to me. What made sense to me was playing outside and having fun, picking apples, picking oranges, playing with everything outside. What made sense to me was being out there, because that's where I didn't belong. I don't belong inside of a box with the person in the front telling me what to do, and that's not what I want for my children either. And that's one of my goals. But can someone else read these off? Because
remove all genocidal figures off of currency. And I call it the demons in your pocket. Because each of those presidential figures on your currency, on our currency, were part of, and are still part of, exterminating Native people that did not want to assimilate. Next one is change all street names that honor genocidal figures or events. So if you want to tear down a statue, that's great, but let's also remove these street names and these schools and these libraries and these universities that were also part of the extermination of brown and red people, brown and black people. Honor the treaties. And the observance of national holidays that celebrate these presidents and other genocidal figures. Open the borders and allow total freedom of movement for all Indigenous people. Because there's no borders. It's all imposed, it's no brainer. Teach the true history of Native people and their true history with colonization. And I think with that, we did a lot of discussion on public school system and how that's part of their curriculum that also works with the state and federal efforts to erase and eliminate Native people, at least on paper, because that's their fantasy of what they want to see in the future. And I think that also had to do with discussion of how the United States has never paid its accountability for true crimes against humanity for what it did for Indigenous people and what it continues to do globally to Indigenous people. So I'm going to pass it down.
Okay. Educate yourselves and do the work to decolonize yourselves. I want to share real quick. Whenever we had that caucus yesterday, back at the youth leadership, we lost like our direction a little bit. We didn't know where to take it. When I came to the caucus and took this with me back to our group, it changed the direction completely, like I shared yesterday. And this was one of them that I shared with the students and everything. Educate yourselves and do the work to decolonize yourselves. It's really, really important. Teach the true history of Native peoples and their true history with colonization. Teach local history and languages, language justice. Educational sovereignty for Native peoples free from interference from the colonial state. Closing of BIA schools and relocation of those resources into culturally competent and sovereign curriculums. End uranium extraction on Turtle Island. Reparations to formerly enslaved peoples of the world. And protections for Two-Spirit and queer people and the right to love and live as they see fit.
Reparation to formerly enslaved people of the world. No, we're down. Reparation of all sacred and historic items to Native people. The colonial state paying for items to be brought home to their original lands from other nations and returning those items, as well as providing the resources to protect those items that each nation sees fit. Protection of all sacred sites and burial grounds. Enforcing the Native American Religious Freedom Act.
Enforce the Declaration of Rights for Indigenous People. Ending single-use plastic. Providing the physical means to allow those who cannot access reusable resources such as metal straws, lunchboxes, more sustainable means access to those items free of charge. 25, the Catholic Church and all churches that abuse Native peoples should pay reparations in the form of land and resources for missions and boarding schools. I wanted to revisit the currency one, removing all genocidal figures of all currency. I think part of, if people know what neoliberalism is, Zapatista has explained neoliberalism as the religion of money. And I think in terms of what we tend to be ritualizing by using these coins and these dollars with landowners and genocidal figures and literal slave masters on them, as we are ritualizing the necessity of white slave masters or landowners. So I think that's a really big step as far as like removing that valuation. You know, we're wanting to remove that valuation from our lives to change.
Logistical and financial support to reconnect and reunify families separated from adoption and boarding schools. Enforce and strengthen the Indian Child Welfare Act. Fund the revitalization of indigenous economies. And something I can say about that is many years ago I was out in South Dakota and we had stopped at a casino and I went to buy some gifts to take back to my people. And everything was made in China. And so the things that we want to put out there are the things from our economy that we can do. End the co-option of indigenous knowledges for commercial use.
Divest from industrialization. I would say that means more than money. Invest in and legitimize indigenous form of medicine and healing. Harvesting, hunting, fishing rights for self-sustaining food and medicine. Free reign on public land. Restorative justice will replace the current criminal justice system. And the only one they've been asking me, so the one that I would add most is free our children living in cages.
Yeah, I guess I also want to tell you all that when we came up with this list, it was also in the context that our relatives from Mary Crow and her family were, she was asked to give a land acknowledgement for Al Gore today. And we were like, well, shit. If you're gonna, give a land acknowledgement in front of Al Gore and all his rich friends, you might as well say this. So they're never going to ask her for a land acknowledgement. We see where their priorities lie.
I want to thank you for listening, especially giving us this space, because whenever I travel, I don't talk just about giving land back, but I also talk about if you're an ally, give us the space for us to come, because if you're working to protect your backyards, then we should be there in your backyards, standing up with you, because there's a million backyards that we could all be protecting right now.